Hello everyone, and welcome to session 5 of our 7-part BizFlow enablement series. To recap, in our last session, session 4, we created our workflow process definition in our BizFlow Process Studio, BPS. This means that we now have our performance evaluation form in AppDev, and we have our performance evaluation process definition in BPS. So now we need to connect the two together. Without this step, they simply exist separate from each other. In other words, we currently have a form with no workflow to drive it, and we have a workflow without a front-end form UI. So in this session, session 5, we'll be back in BPS, where we'll be adding our AppDev created performance evaluation form as an application to be mapped to the process definition. BPS also allows users to add and map to any other form or front end that a user may have developed, for example with AngularJS. And once an application has been mapped to the process definition, we can then map it to each individual activity. With that, let's get into the product. Now, I know I mentioned we'd be doing all the mapping in BPS, but this whole process actually starts in AppDev, where we'll first be publishing our project. So let's quickly open up our project and our form. And just as publishing the data model from the Universal Data Modeler exposes it to the project in AppDev Studio, publishing the project from Studio exposes the URL we need to be able to create a new application in BPS. And so since this is the first time we're publishing our project here, we're going to click on the Publish icon and select Validation and Publish. The validation will see if there are any unsaved changes or issues with our form or data model that could cause an error with the publication. So since there were no errors, let's add a tag to identify this publication. And this is our initial publish, so that's what I'm going to put, as well as a description of what's being published. And descriptions are more applicable in cases of republication, when there's been edits, such as additions or removals to our form. So for this time, since we're publishing our performance evaluation form for the first time, that's what I'm going to put. And as a best practice, I'm also going to identify who's doing the publishing. And of course, this is all captured by the system, but it's kind of nice to have this all as a log in our description field. So with that, we're going to publish. So with that, our project is published. You'll notice how we only have one row here in this publication modal, and that's because we only have one form in our project, our performance evaluation form. If we had more, there would be multiple here, and we could select specifically which form we wanted to tie to our BPS. With that, we're going to click the Copy WIH, and as we all know, WIH stands for Work Item Handler. So copy WIH or Work Item Handler URL. So with that URL, we can now navigate over to BPS to register our application with our process definition. But while we're here in AppDev, speaking of Work Item Handler, if you recall during our last session, we hid portions of the Work Item Handler, specifically the toolbar section. As I mentioned, we already have buttons built directly onto our form. So if I scroll down to the very bottom, here are our Save and Submit buttons. And if I click on the component, you'll notice that we're using the Work Item Handler Action Caller component. These are out-of-the-box AppDev components that behave in the same way as the actual Work Item Handler buttons and are inherently integrated with our process definition to allow users to interact with the workflow, such as, saving the form or submitting the form or, exiting, etc. So that's why we were able to hide the toolbar section, which contains the Work Item Handler buttons. So with that, let's move over to BPS. In BPS, we're going to use the URL we just copied from AppDev to create an application, which will be our performance evaluation form, in our BPS project. And to do so, we're first going to log into our server. So again, right-click on the server name, click Connect, enter your login ID and password. Next, expand on your project, and this time, rather than going into the process definition folder, we're going to right-click on Application, click New Application, and this will bring up the new application modal, which will walk us through adding a new application to our project. So for name, we're going to give it something descriptive, which will be description is optional, so I'm going to leave it blank. And here are our out-of-the-box options, and as you can see, BizFlow AppDev is already pre-selected. From here, we can click Next, and in this field where it says provide the URL of the application, we're simply going to paste the URL we copied from AppDev. Hit Next. As you can see, the status is already in the publishable status, which is what we want. We're going to hit Finish. To confirm that the application was added correctly, we can just hit this arrow next to our application folder, and here is our performance evaluation form. Now that we've added our application, we need to map it with our process definition. So let's open and check out our process definition. I'll zoom in here just a little bit using the zoom in icon up top. And here, all I have to do is right-click on any open space in the canvas and select Application. In the resulting modal, we can select the performance evaluation form application we just created by clicking on the application folder under our BPS project, selecting it from this window on the left, and hitting the right arrow to add it to our process definition application list. Hit OK. So now that we've done that, we need to map the application to each activity in our process. And to do so, we're simply going to right-click on the activity, select Application, and just as we did for the overall process definition, we simply have to select the application from the left, and I can expand this name column to make sure it is indeed the correct application, and then move it over to the right. And I'm going to do that for all of our activities here. All right, now that we've mapped the application at both the process definition level and each individual activity level, the last thing we need to do before employees can actually use our performance evaluation form and workflow is that we need to publish our BPS project. But before we can do that, we need to first set our process definition from editable to publishable, which we can do from the General tab. And to access the General tab, we simply need to right-click again on the open area of the canvas, select General this time, and here in the publication status, we're going to hit the drop-down and toggle it over to publishable and hit OK. So we're going to, at this point, check our process definition back in, and no, we do not want to check it out again. And to publish, we're simply going to right-click on our project here, hit Publish, move over both our process definition and, of course, as you can see, the application follows. Hit Next. Move over both the process definition to the operational environment. That's the published environment. We're going to do the same thing here in the application. And if we needed to, we could actually define individual folders if this was a part of a larger project or where we had groups of process definitions and applications for this larger performance evaluation or HR project. We could actually define an, for example, an HR operational environment folder where we could put all of our, HR related process definitions and applications, such as our performance evaluation. So now that we've defined what we want to publish and where we want to publish them to, we simply have to hit Finish. So now we can actually test this out to see what our performance evaluation application and solution will look like for our end users. To do so, let's log into our BPM portal as an employee. From here, we would normally navigate to the Start New menu, find our process and initiate, but for the purposes of time, I've already initiated our performance evaluation process, so I'm going to go ahead and open that one up. So now employees and managers in HR are able to do self-assessments and responses via this automated form rather than through their previous manual processes. So let's just quickly fill out some of these fields here. For example, let's say this is, I'm Jane Doe. I can enter an email, my position title. I can self-assess my performance through the 3 qualifiers, the work quality, communication and team building, and job knowledge. And of course, as we built out all of the lookup tables, each one has a drop down of 1 through 5. So I could say very satisfactory, satisfactory, outstanding. And for each, I could justify my self-rating in the comments section. So scrolling further down, I can also add 3 achievements and accomplishments from this past year, as well as 3 goals for the next year. Now, in addition to all the fields on the actual form, we have some out-of-the-box capabilities available to us through the Work Item Handler features on the right side, and I can actually expand this window here by clicking on the icon. And so first we can add attachments to kind of go hand in hand with our form. I can click Select Files, and maybe I want to attach the job description of a business analyst to my self-assessment. I can do so. And so now this document will go wherever my form goes to be able to be opened by whoever is reviewing my form. If I wanted to kind of communicate with my manager and HR, whoever's reviewing this form, I can do so through the comment feature. If I want to send out some more official communications through emails, then I can do so through correspondence. And a nice thing about correspondence is that we have a feature that lets users define templates to be used so that, rather than each user having to kind of draft up an email from scratch, we can have official organization headers and footers to be used across the board. So I'm going to close that out. And I can collapse the window by hitting this arrow here. And so while this is a major improvement from doing the performance evaluation cycle through, for example, Word documents or email, there are still improvements to the overall experience that can be made. For example, here I've taken on the role of a business analyst employee, specifically Jane Doe, and I'm doing my self-assessment, but if I scroll down even further, the form is also showing me sections and fields meant specifically for my manager and the HR specialist. So I, as an employee doing my self-assessment, need to be aware that these sections aren't meant for me and I need to consciously skip over them. Another thing is that there are no mandatory fields right now, so I could feasibly enter nothing, and the system would still let me submit my form. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and submit our evaluation form. And now let's take on the role of Jane Doe's manager. So we're going to log out and log back in as Jane's manager. Here we can see Jane's self-assessment form has been routed to her manager per our process definition. We can even verify this by selecting the specific request and opening our monitoring window. This window provides metadata about the form, such as a visual representation of the end-to-end process flow, with the current activities highlighted by the green play indicator. We also have an audit trail, and so we can see who is the participant for each activity, as well as when the activity was created and when it was completed. We can also see any attachments and comments that were made on the form by any participant. To actually see the form and Jane's self-assessment information, we're going to close this window and I can actually open up the request directly. Here I can review the data and I can add my own comments and sign. I can also recommend Jane for a promotion and add my reasons. Now here, even from the manager's role, there are ways in which the form could be improved. So for both the manager and HR specialist roles, the intent is for them to just be able to review the self-assessment information, and then any comments or additional things that they want to communicate back to Jane should be made in their specific comment text boxes or in the comment work item handler feature here to the right. However, with the way the form is designed right now, the manager and the HR specialist can actually directly edit the information that Jane entered. And so we'll be tackling these areas needing improvement in our next session, session 6. So let's quickly recap the session and preview our next one as always. So in this session, session 5, we walked through how to add the AppDev form as an application to BPS, and then how to map the application to our process definition and activities. And we also tested our performance evaluation solution as an end user through our BPM portal. In our next session, session 6, we'll be walking through how to add that UI and data logic that we were just talking about to better enhance and personalize the experience of using the performance evaluation form. So we'll be adding things such as validations and relationships through our universal data modeler, and we'll also be adding conditions in our AppDev Studio. With that, thank you all for joining us for this session, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one.